So a few things come to mind. When we're talking about development cooperation, you have development cooperation that's going to countries. So it's very important that the country's voice is there, and it's seen that it's not imposed from the outside. So country ownership is an important concept, and that's the only way that you will get the domestic buy-in, that when you are prioritizing development cooperation for a project, you know that it reflects the national priorities. So that's number one. Number two, it's very important to see how these national priorities can be tied in with global public goods. So when development cooperation is going from one country to the next, it's not lost opportunity. No, it's building collectively, because if we have a healthy population in Asia, it's a public good. If we have educated population in Africa, that's a public good for everybody's well-being, because the cost of not doing that is going to be big for all of us, not just at a national level. The third point is, because of the fiscal space, and today the OECD came out with its report where DAC countries, actually ODA is down 23%. That's huge. And this includes G7 and other countries, so it's an issue. So we all know that governments cannot do it alone, so the private sector needs to come in. And concessional finance, or what MDBs are thinking about today and doing more of, is how this type of financing can go to de-risk private investments in countries. So what do we mean by de-risking? Now, if you look at the risk premium in the world, it's quadrupled than where we were a month ago. Yeah. So that even makes the amount of resources required to de-risk bigger, the cost of guarantees bigger. We need to be innovative in this global financial architecture on tools that can push in more private sector investment. So this is a second point, that it's not just sovereign, no, it's more private sector. And with the private sector, we need to think about defining opportunities in the countries, and that these opportunities could be linked to projects which push global public goods like renewables today in different countries. That's a fantastic investment opportunity and a way for MDBs to provide financing to the private sector, and it's a way to push our development cooperation. So, and we work together on Egypt's country platform. So it's nationally owned, but it's pushing the private sector and it's de-risking investments. So this is another important point. The third is, because of the landscape, which is full of players, whether domestically or internationally, we need to cut inefficiencies and therefore reduce redundancy, reduce repeated projects, the same project by different financiers, or the same projects by different ministries, if you will. So you have at different levels the need to streamline, the need to be slimmer, so that the outcome and the impact is bigger. So this mutual reliance, which many MDBs are doing today and development partners are doing today is very important. It's looking at the procedures, making them better, but also at a national level, ensure that all this cooperation is happening in a way that where we reduce redundancy and push efficiency. So those would be my points on this, but it all starts with country ownership, how we tie that with the globe, or the global goals and the public goods, and then make sure that the private sector is there. Absolutely. But today, in a world where risk premiums are so high, each and every dollar to de-risk is important, and then mutual reliance across the different financiers in order to ensure that we are not just repeating ourselves, but actually trying to get the highest return on each and every dollar of development finance or development cooperation, whenever way we want to define it.
Yeah, and I mean, all of this really makes sense, and the cost of capital was already a concern for many countries, and the current environment is just making it more complicated, so we can maybe get back to that. But can I just ask you one more question on your first point, which I think is pivotal, and for us at the Coalition, we really believe that we need to stop thinking of development as equaling the development industry or development equaling aid, and really starting with a country perspective. So country ownership, I would say country leadership and execution capacity is really important. You were a very strong lead in Egypt and galvanized a range of different funders around your priorities. That capacity is not as strong in every country. So how would you help to bolster that capacity so that we can have country ownership, not just in slogan, but in real leadership and execution?
So a few points also, and here's where the role of development cooperation is not just on the money.
Yes.
There's technical assistance, there's design of strategies, there's also important project design, capacity building. So development cooperation is not just about the dollar bill. There's all these points that you mentioned. And when I say national or country ownership, I'm talking about a national narrative. What does this country want to? How would it show its competitiveness? What is its comparative advantage? We see in the world today supply chains under a lot of strain. Yes. So what does each country? How can each country localize some of that and be part of the supply chain? So I would say that every country, regardless of where it is, has a parliament, and the government has to present its strategy to parliament. And within that, there are different priorities, and the international world in different institutions provides insights, provides capacity building. If you're doing a country program with the World Bank, it has to reflect your priorities. If you're doing an IMF program, it says homegrown program. So there is a lot of national ownership there, but we just need to, as you mentioned, make it sustainable. Yeah. So it's not just a snapshot, but it's something that lasts, and performance-based budgeting is something that helps with that.
No, thank you. That's wonderful. And yes, the long-term view is really important to us at the Coalition. We want to plan for 2 decades ahead, informed by the moment, but not captured by it.
Well, first, development is more relevant than ever. So that is something that we all have to, agree with. Reimagining it might be why we are, you formed this coalition, and you spoke about us, but we also need to speak about you, Alexia, and all the great work that you have been doing over the years to go from policy to implementation, and that is very important. So development is more relevant than ever. To be able to do development, you need development cooperation, because it's not just a national effort. This national effort has to be within a global context. And it's a global context that we need to agree on. But the global context today is one that is very fragmented, and it's one that lacks trust. And this is something that I hope we will, through our discussion today, think about and think how we can bridge that lack of trust in a very fragmented world. The other issue with development cooperation is the delivery. In many instances, we talk about it, we provide insight, but then when it comes to delivery, when it comes to measuring impact, sometimes people have different views, and it might be disproportionate between one country and the other. So we also lose a lot when we generalize. And that's why when we think about development cooperation, we need to maybe be more granular. We need to look at examples that work, examples that did not work, why didn't they work, and push forward. But absolutely important, development is relevant. A lot of the world's problems today would be solved if countries are developing, and of course it's very difficult to say this with a backdrop of conflict and so forth, but nonetheless, populations exist, countries will exist. It's a path that we will have to go through. So regardless of the exogenous shocks that are facing us, it is very relevant. It's relevant for countries, it's relevant for companies, it's relevant for individuals. So it goes all the way. So again, I would say that through the coalition, which I'm very happy to be a commissioner with, and this was announced day before yesterday, that we will, together with a very impressive group of distinguished experts, try and not reimagine, but not rethink, but really reimagine how we can do all of this together and create that trust and create that multi-stakeholder engagement that's going to push development at country level, but also, once again, development at country level means that we need to have development cooperation where all of us come together.
No, fantastic.
Or have to include the reforms you do in order to push renewables, pricing between private sector, for instance. So it implicitly has that. But explicit reforms are also come in the form of policy-based lending.
Yes.
And what we are going to see after the events in the region now is that more countries, in order to avoid international market borrowing, are going to go to the development finance institutions and request fast dispersing policy-based lending, correct? Because it's cheaper, but it's going to be linked to reforms. And you're going to be doing these reforms at a very tough time when growth is not, and the growth and jobs sort of dynamics is not as smooth as it was just a month ago. So I think, our role would be to how can we, help and contribute, prioritizing reforms, ensuring that when we're talking about reimagining development cooperation, it's one which is also sensitive to the moment, sensitive to the shocks, sensitive to what the countries are doing. So when I say country ownership, it's two ways.
Absolutely.
It's the priorities of the country, but at the same time, when it's designing a policy-based lending framework or a reform matrix, particularly at time of shock, it's one which is sensible. It's one that also can, have the citizens around it in different ways. And then final word also, we have been noticing recently that a lot of the development cooperation also takes into account, internalizes social aspects. And that's important and much needed now.
Yes.
So I think, how we define this social support or social programs at a time when a shock is as big as it is now. It's a price shock. It's a fuel shock, electricity shock. It's actually multidimensional, multifaceted. It affects everybody. So when it affects everybody, also the development finance that's going to go one way or the other is going to be quite dramatic.